What's up, guys? This is Miasin, and today we're back with the best hand traps. I was gonna say the best board breakers. No, the best board breakers is gonna be tomorrow, so stay tuned. And yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting one because we're gonna be going over the 30 best hand traps in this game and try to figure out which ones you really need to main deck, which ones you at least have to have in the side deck, and which ones are just not needed whatsoever. But yeah, before we go any further, y'all already know the drill. Smash the like and subscribe button. It really motivates me a lot to keep making videos like these. You really have no idea. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Okay, so the first one is Rainbow Kuriboh. It is a light... Hold on a second. No, that's actually the wrong monster. It wasn't even supposed to be Rainbow Kuriboh. Hold on a second. Which one's the one that I was thinking? Was it Kuriboh or something like that? I forgot. The Light Fiend one. Okay, it doesn't matter. Who cares? You get what I'm saying. The one that is a Light Fiend and that is searchable off of track, prevents your opponent from FTKing you or OTKing you in Tenpai. Yeah, this one's a waste of trees. Honestly, pretty much every single Kuriboh monster out there except for Link Kuriboh is a waste of tree. So yeah, my bad for all the Kuriboh fans out there, aka like 3 humans on Earth. Okay, Infinite Impermanence is obviously a must main just because, you know, it's the safest hand trap out there. It doesn't lose to Cobb of the Grave, doesn't lose to, you know, to Talent. It can be drawn for turn and it's still really nice. The card's overall a very solid card. Ash is by far the best hand trap in the game just because it hits the most amount of cards out there. But in terms of power level, it's not necessarily the most powerful. It's just that it's so versatile. So that's the reason why it's always going to be a must main. I don't really have to justify these two cards. They're always going to be at the very top of every single tier list video. Okay, so this one's Typhoon, which is not a waste of tree. It's actually a solid card. It's just that it really depends on how people, you know, deck build, and I mean, rather how people play as well. Like, if they play into Typhoon, then maybe it might be a good card. I don't really think the Raziel deck necessarily has to play into this card, like, at all. However, being able to destroy the field spell is not too bad. So it might have some merits, but I don't really think you need it for anything. You might as well just play Duster, Lightning Storm over this card. So I really don't think that this card has a reason to exist over other cards. So that's the reason why I think it's way too niche. If you can't use it as an actual hand trap, then it's really just not worth playing because honestly, destroying only one face-up card is just simply not too good. Miradora, I don't even think anyone who watches this video even knows what this card is. It's so incredibly bad. I have it on my tier list videos just as a meme at this point, but I actually forgot what the card does. It's like when your opponent summons a monster with 2000 or more attack, you summon this, bounce back something or negate. Actually, no, it doesn't bounce back. Yeah, otherwise it almost would have been decent, but no. Of course not. Yeah, this card is utter garbage. DD Crow is definitely a maybe, but it's one of the bad maybes. It's worse than a Bystial just because, you know, it hits spells and traps, sure, but it doesn't really do anything for you, and it's just overall way too weak. It's really bad against Malice just because they want to get their cards banished in the first place. And against Raziel, it's also very weak, so I'm just not a big fan of DD Crow overall. Nibiru is a very interesting one. This one is anywhere between maybe to side deck staple, but I do believe that it is very respectable as a side deck staple, even though you don't necessarily have to side deck it, just because at the very least against the Malice deck, it is extremely good. Against Raziel, it's not too great, but you can at the very least side one Nibiru when you're going first in the Raziel mirror match, or when you're playing Raziel yourself against other decks, you can go Gallon Granite, surge the one of Nibiru, and then you nib your opponent. So even if you're not trying to use this as a hand trap, but rather as a searchable floodgate, quote unquote, if you understand what I'm trying to say, then it's still really good. So I think it's a good card overall. I don't think you're necessarily trying to main deck 3 copies of Nibiru, because there's a lot of applications where this card really just does nothing at all. Bystials in general are also very interesting. I think if you're not playing the Malice deck, the Bystials are not really worth main decking at all. Obviously, if you're playing Tenpai, then the Wood of Magnamut is insane. As if we're talking just about Magnamut in your deck, if it has like inherent synergy, then it's always going to be a must main, obviously. As hand traps, the Bystials are not really good. So obviously, if DD Crew is down there, it's for a good reason. It's because Raziel and Malice, they don't really lose to Bystials. So why would I put them really high on the tier list? Obviously, Druid's Worm is not too bad against like Detonator Pass. But then again, if your opponent makes Detonator Pass, then you also had other hand traps, so you can say that the other hand traps are the reason why you were able to get yourself in that position in the first place. So maybe Magnamut is a really good one, but the other ones, not too much. Matter of fact, Saronir and Baldric are actually really bad if you're not playing, you know, a decent amount of Bystials in your deck. Ghost Mourner is actually a really good one. I think it's actually better to main deck than Nibiru, because if you have Mourner with Dominus, Purge, Ash, Ogre, Veiler, Imperm, you're playing all the 6 hand traps that can be used on Duo Drive. They're the only ones that can be used there. Obviously, there's other, like, really bad hand traps that can be used, like Cypherm Gamma, but that is a one-of. So, I mean, it's not that it's a bad card. It's just that it's an unrealistic card, because obviously it's a one-of with a Garnet. Literally, yeah, 2500 attack monster that does nothing. But yeah, Mourner, really good in that regard, but as a card, again, it's not the best because it's once per turn. In the TCG, it's really awkward because of the fact that when you use it on your own turn, it's just like really weird. You gotta use it in Chainlink 1, and then if your opponent has like an optional if effect, then that is used in Chainlink 2, which means that Mourner doesn't negate anything, and the effect resolves, etc. It's just really whack. It does have some applications where even if you top deck it for turn, holy crap, I had no idea how that happened. Even if you top deck Mourner for turn against the Raziel deck, it might have some applications when your opponent goes plug in, revive back the detonator, and then use the effect to like attach back. You can chain the Mourner, and then your opponent either chains the detonator to destroy, or, you know, he lets it resolve, but then the Mourner negates it, so it's really interesting. Retaliating Sea is also a maybe, because it really does depend on if people play decks that lose to this card, because Snake Eye with Memento, these decks get absolutely demolished by Retaliating Sea. Everything else, for the most part, really doesn't. However, Retaliating Sea does have some inherent synergy in Raziel, because if you hit your opponent with the Retaliating Sea, then you're really just one level 4 body away from making the duo drive and then getting your stuff going. So you can draw 6 hand traps, like Retaliating Sea with a Mulcharmy, and then normal summon the Mulcharmy, and that gets your stuff going. That's really cool. That's the best thing about Retaliating Sea. But to be fair, I don't think that people will be playing the decks that lose to this card, therefore this card will not see too much play. But that is the reason why I have the maybe section. It really does depend on the other decks that are going to be, you know, a part of the format. Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood, I just don't think is a real hand trap if you're using it as a real hand trap, but if you're using it as a time card, then obviously it is what it is. As long as you play really fast, this card should not be an issue. I mean, I really don't remember the last time I went into time. I usually try my absolute hardest to play fast, so this card doesn't really affect me that much. But if people play this like in the main deck or when there's like freaking 25 minutes left on the clock, I don't really think it's a good card. I actually think it's terrible, because against the Raziel deck, you're only giving like a couple of light, I mean, you're giving maybe like 5,000 life points to your opponent, which is not too bad considering the fact that it does take multiple turns to kill your opponent if you're not doing like the Dugaris OTK line. It doesn't really make your opponent gain any resources. It's not like a Mulcharmy where he draws cards for all of your summons, which is way more scary than just gaining life points. That's Artifact Lancia is insanity. It is clearly one of the best side deck staples. This one you have to play over like literally anything else in the side deck, just because it is a turn skip against the Malice deck. It's even better, I want to say, than Nibiru against the Malice deck, just because it can also overlap for some other things, and if your opponent has like Evenly or Cosmic, your Lancia also protects you from those cards, which is really good. But the fact that it's a lingering card, it doesn't really have any counterplays. Obviously, there's Call by the Grave and Crossout, but you can argue there's also Crossout for the Nibiru, and also your opponent, if he has a lot of gas, then he can also beat Nibiru that way. It really does depend which one do you think is the most required between Lancia and Nibiru. But eventually, Lancia will be even better because you're going to be able to search it with 7 Tachyon. So you can afford to only play 1 Lancia for when you go first, and then 1, 2 Nibirus, whatever, so that you have more diversity and more cards that can counter the Malice deck. But at the current moment, I still think that Lancia is extremely good. It's just that it doesn't cover a lot of ground when you think about it. This card has a lot of dead matchups. But then again, against the one deck where it is good, it is extremely good. Gamma, I just don't think is worth it just because of all the bad cards that you gotta play. I mean, the bad cards, it's really just one. But then again, you can also play Delta, and obviously where there is Gamma, there is also Delta. So that is a consideration. Against Raziel, your Delta can hit the Bonfire, but then if your opponent has another Bonfire, then it's not really great for you. Otherwise, you can obviously hold for the Field Spell, which is not the best. You can Gamma a couple of things. Gamma is just a good card overall. It's just that, again, there's a lot of drawbacks for playing this package, so I'm not a huge fan usually. And you also can't really main deck these cards. They have the exact same issues as the Mulcharmies. They're only good going second, that's it, that's all. Not to mention that you can't really play these cards in the Raziel deck because you can, but if you like resolve Gamma or Delta, whatever, on your own turn, then you control a non-level or rank 4 monster, so if you summon X Raziel, it's not going to be able to search, which is really annoying, actually. Anyways, Dominus Impulse. This one's also not great, actually. Even if you can play this card, nothing forces you to play it. It's actually really bad against Raziel because the only cards that play into Dominus Impulse are Node, Plugin, and there might be another one. Oh, Ice Raziel to special summon from deck. That's it. Those are the only 3 effects that lose to Dominus Impulse, but Dominus Purge is really good because when you purge the Duo Drive, that's just another card that, I mean, if anything, that's even better than Veiling or Impriming because there's even less counters, and you also can't cross out a Dominus Purge in Raziel just because you're not going to be playing the card yourself, so it's much better. So I think this is the one format where Dominus Impulse is actually worse than Dominus Purge. It's still a good card against the other decks, but against the top deck, a little mediocre, just a little subpar. Flying Sea is Not good at all. Actually, and by the way, Contact C, or rather, yeah, I think that's Contact C. Well, both of them have pretty much the exact same effect. They're kind of weak when you think about it, because if you summon these cards to your opponent when he special summons a monster, then he can go X-Raziel, dump the Aggregator, and then negate, or he can send the Contact C or Flying C that you give him for the summon of Ice Raziel, and then he's no longer locked under these cards. So they look really broken, but they actually completely suck. I'm really just not a fan of them whatsoever. Mulcharmy Furos is absolutely a must main. This card is extremely good because it covers so much ground. It's insanely good against Malice. Even though when you main deck it going first, then obviously it does nothing. In the Raziel deck, at the very least, it has the merit of being a level 4 monster. So if you special summon a level 4, then you can normal summon this card. And it does some plays, but yeah, it's not like the best one out there to draw still, but going second, it is extremely good just because, you know, you're going to be drawing so many cards against the Malice deck. Against the Raziel deck, you're not going to be drawing too much, but if your opponent still full combos, then you're still drawing 3 cards, which is great. And if your opponent doesn't and just makes one rank 4 and passes, which usually that's what people do, and they make like Baguska pass, then any one board breaker completely cripples them. Like one Imperm beats them, one Ultimate Slayer, one Book of Eclipse, whatever, it's just going to demolish them. So I do think that Mulcharmy Furos is a must main this format. No material, no thank you. Yeah, Ghost Ogre, that's another must main. It's one of the worst must mains, but it's still a really good one. This one, I don't necessarily think you have to play 3, but it's a really good card just because, again, it does beat Duo Drive really, really well. They can counter it, by the way, by going into Detonator first and then Duo Drive, so that if you try to Ogre the Duo Drive, Detonator can just protect from destruction by detaching material instead. So keep that in mind, because if your opponent looked at your hand with something like Talent, then he may just play differently and then take out like another card and then play around Ghost Ogre that way. But usually people are going to play into Ogre because they respect Nibiru, so they're going to start with the Duo Drive and then make the Detonator later on. So I still think that this card is extremely good just because people don't play around it, and they shouldn't, just because, again, you gotta pick your poison. You either lose to Ghost Ogre or you lose to Nibiru, and personally, I'd rather lose to Ghost Ogre than lose to Nibiru, because with a 1-card combo, if I get Ogred, I still end on Detonator with 3 materials, one of them being the Aggregator. But if I play into Nibiru, then I end on absolutely nothing. So yeah, just remember that, because honestly, I still think that this card will be doing a lot of good for you, but it's not going to completely carry you either. Ghost Bell is honestly like super copium. I don't understand why people keep like saying positive things about this card. I don't really have anything good to say about it. I think it's a really weak card. If you play Ghost Bell, then you're playing so many other hand traps before it, because this is by far one of the shittiest ones that you can play. It's worse than the Mulcharmys if you're going second. Obviously, it's better if you're going first. There might be some merit if you're also trying to stop like other hand traps or board breakers. Like if you're trying to stop like a Bystial on your own deck, then sure. But as a card to beat your opponent's deck, it's really bad. Against the Malice deck, if anything, you can argue it's now bad, because you can stop the GWC, which is fine. But apart from that, it does really nothing, so I hate this card. I think against Raziel, it is garbage. It stops the plugin, and that's about it. And even then, by that time, you can negate it with the field spell. So yeah, this card is mega shit. Ghost Reaper, I'm gonna make a video dedicated on this card. I don't necessarily think it's a bad card, but I do think it's really niche. Very, very niche. And it is just as good as the targets that you can play in your extra deck, and also the context of the game, and also your own deck itself. There are so many variables that you gotta keep into consideration when playing this card that I don't think it's the kind of card that is just plug and play, you just slap in your deck and expect to do really well with. No. I think Ghost Reaper requires a lot of thought and effort, unlike these cards where they're really just auto-win buttons. You just activate them and usually they kind of do a lot of job for you. Anyway, Skullmeister is very bad, but there's almost an argument where you can put it here just because it's a level 4 monster, but to be fair, that's not a really valid argument just because it's a really bad card itself. You might as well play Bystials or even DD Crow over Skullmeister. I really think that this card is cheeks. The last time it was good was against Unchained, that's it. That's all I can really remember. Fantasme is really bad in Xyz format. Obviously, I don't really have to justify myself too much. It can see play against the Malice deck, but by the time you get to use this, it might be already too late. You can't draw into Mulcharmy, you can't draw into Imperm. Drawing into Veiler might be bad because, again, you let your opponent Dormouse resolve, you let your opponent do a bunch of things, because the Link summon of the Haggard Lizardos is after Dormouse and White Rabbit steps, so I think Fantasme's timing is really awkward, and that's the reason why I don't like this card. Mulcharmy Parolia is a very interesting one. I think it's obviously worse than Furos, but it's still a good card. So you can argue that it's a side deck staple if you at least don't want to main deck the card, but there is also an argument where in the Raziel deck you play both, because again, they're level 4 monsters, and your deck has the space to play so many non-engine cards, you might as well capitalize off of playing as many of the good hand traps out there. Dimension Shifter, this is the very first time, I think, in the history where I make a tier list where Shifter is not in the must main. Even if your deck can play Shifter, I do not recommend main decking Shifter this format just because everybody can play Shifter. So, because of the fact that everybody can play it, nobody really loses too hard to it other than, you know, the archaic decks, the old ones like Ubel, Snake Eye, etc. People who are still, for some reason, trying to, you know, give free wins to their opponent by playing garbage decks. Then Shifter obviously is going to be really good against them, but if you're playing Raziel or Malice, Shifter is just... it just slows down the game for everybody. Like, even Malice is going to play worse under Shifter. You think that it's broken under Shifter, it really isn't. You're making Hearts of Cryptor with SP Little Night Pass, which is honestly not that great. Effect Veiler, yeah, this card is worse than Imperm, but still very good. Droll and Logbird is a super interesting one because you can argue that for some decks, it's a must main, but it's not a must main for everyone because with Droll and Logbird, you are not really hurting your opponent too much if he's playing Raziel, and if he's playing Malice, then you're basically doing nothing. I actually think that Droll as a hand trap is a garbage card. What is really good about Droll is that you can use it on yourself. Basically, Droll yourself when you're getting hit by a Mulcharmy, and that way you can pretty much full combo in Malice, except for the field spell search from Red Ransom. But everything else, you're always setting cards, and you're always finding like cute ways of bypassing Droll in the Malice deck, so I think that's really nice. I think that's like the main reason why you're even considering Droll, but apart from that, it's a really bad card. I don't think that it's a card that's really gonna cripple the Raziel deck whatsoever, unless they go like Desires into like Bonfire, then yeah, sure, okay, Droll is good there, but if they go Bonfire into Ice Raziel, then at the they were still guaranteed like a Baguska through your Droll, and you still need like more than one card in order to be that, so yeah, it's kind of whack. Chaos Hunter is also a very interesting one. This card is comparable to Artifact Lancia, but I think it's a little worse just because, well, first of all, this card can get outed, but it's gonna be hard, obviously. This card's just a little weird. I mean, it doesn't lose to, like, Call by the Grave and Cross Out, which is really good. Are you really trying to play Chaos Hunter? Again, there's outs, technically, but it's gonna be hard to out if you're playing Malice, honestly. So whether you play Artifact Lancer or Chaos Hunter, I think it changes very little. You do have to discard a card to summon this, whereas Artifact Lancia is basically free. And Lancia, I guess you can turbo out with Dagda or with the 7 Tachyon when it's gonna come out. Now Chaos Hunter might be like a solid alternative. And also when you're under Shifter, you can summon Chaos Hunter and then unshifter yourself. So that's also really good, but then your opponent has to like summon a monster first. It's extremely good against Kashtira, and it is still very good on your own turn. So I do like it, and I do think, last time I checked, Chaos Hunter, I think, is actually one-sided, whereas Artifact Lancia is two-sided. Yeah, the card reads your opponent cannot banish cards, so that's actually really nice. With that being said, I think you can still get hit by evenly matched if you have Chaos Hunter on the field, just because you're the one banishing your own cards with evenly. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, this card's great. I do think that it is a staple that people could be looking into this format, just because, again, it is almost equally as good as Artifact Lancia. It is, at the very least, comparable to it. And last but absolutely not least is Dominus Purge. This card is honestly on the same level as Ashe this format. It is remarkable because, again, you need as many cards to stop Raziel Duo Drive from resolving. If you can prevent that card from resolving, you are in business, my friend. If your deck can play Dominus Purge, you have absolutely no excuse not to play it. In the OCG, we're seeing everybody and their mother play this card, whereas again, Dominus Impulse, even the decks that can play it, like Malice, for example, even though there's a little bit of conflicting with Dotscaper, they're still choosing not to play Dominus Impulse, and they're side decking it instead when they're going second, so that when they're trying to break a board, they also can use Dominus Impulse to protect themselves from Nibiru, because going second when your opponent controls a card, then you can use this card from your hand, and you know. But yeah, that's about it for this tier list of the best hand traps that you can play this format. You guys let me know how you feel about it in the comment section below. I think I did a relatively good job. I'm satisfied with this positioning. But yeah, if you got any complaints, feel free to complain to my manager. That's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.